You never expect a tragedy like that to happen when you're on vacation. This thing showed up on the porch and I'd never seen anything like it. We were frantically running through the house away from this thing as it was barreling through furniture, aggressively chasing us. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and become fully immersed in today's adventure, you found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck because you're gonna need it. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. Enjoy the show. I've always loved fragrances, but not usually for me. See, I'm the guy that's constantly picking out my girl's favorite scents because I know she loves them and I just want to get her what she likes, but I also love the way she smells. But when it comes to myself, I've never been too into buying colognes or fragrances. You know those big, expensive bottles? I'm not even sure I would like this scent or like wearing it consistently, so why bother buying a large one? But that's why I was so pumped when Scentbird reached out to sponsor this video. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service that lets you try out different scents without the huge commitment of buying full-size bottles, which is perfect for somebody like me who wants to smell great without splurging. I got to try 2 fragrances. The first one's Open Road by Drift, and the other one was called True Western by Yellowstone. Wow. See, this Open Road one has this amazing blend of cedarwood, black pepper, and tonka, and of course bergamot. Let me tell you, this one smells so good. And this Yellowstone True Western one has desert verbena, yellow grapefruit, vetiver root, golden aspen, and atlas cedarwood. What a blend. It's fresh, robust, and strong without being overpowering. And Scentbird is super affordable and it takes the pressure off. You don't have to commit to a full-size bottle of any fragrance right away. And your first month is just $8. And after that, it's less than $17 a month, which is a great deal if you're a fragrance lover or you're just getting into it. And they have a great selection as well of big names like Prada and Versace, and also some cool niche brands like Roja and Parfums de Marly. And the best part is that you get a 30-day supply of each fragrance. So you really get a chance to try it out over an extended period of time and find your signature scent. Plus they have a quiz that points you in the right direction to find new fragrances that you might like. And the packaging is super compact, so it's easy to take with you anywhere you go. And if you want to give Scentbird a try, just scan the QR code or hit the link below. And don't forget to use my code Dougie to get 55% off. You will also get free delivery straight to your door and a free case. That means you're getting it for just $8, which is a total steal. Thank you again, Scentbird, for sponsoring this video. Back to the show. So when I was about 13 years old, I had the opportunity to go on a vacation with one of my best friends to Tennessee. The plan was to drive down to Tennessee into the Smoky Mountain area and stay at one of the luxury cabins. If you aren't familiar with the Gatlinburg or Sevierville area, there's some really fun, cool towns with great restaurants and live music, and they have really cheap luxury cabin stays up in the Smoky Mountains. And when you live in the Midwest, it's not that far of a drive to get down there and feel like you're in this luxury, awesome cabin high in the mountains, experiencing an elegant forest getaway. So when I was presented with the opportunity to go on this trip, I begged my parents for weeks to allow it. And I actually eventually got them to go over and meet Adam's parents and talk to them so they would trust them and allow me to go on this week-long vacation to Tennessee with them. Everything went well and I got the green light to go and I was so excited. And just like any road trip, you get up at 4 a.m., everybody packs into the car and you start driving to your destination before the sun even rises. And even though it was a bit of a far drive, we got there in a blink of an eye because we were there with friends and family and we were just so excited to enjoy the Smoky Mountains that weekend. Not to mention it was the 4th of July weekend, so much fun activities were going on. I'm not going to bore you with the drive, nothing crazy happened. We got there, we were in Sevierville, and we were ready to go see our luxury cabin. So we're driving down this awesome strip of restaurants and souvenir stores until we pull up to what seems like a barrier to then drive up the mountain. There's a small cabin where the property manager stays and there's a barrier arm that's in between you and driving up the mountain. You have to check in with the property manager and have a quick discussion with him and let him know what cabin you're staying at before he opens the barrier arm and lets you drive up the mountain. Adam's parents had all their paperwork together and it was a very easy check-in process, but the property manager had to brief us on some security issues before we actually were allowed to go up to our cabin. And most of them were very basic, like if you're gonna smoke cigarettes, don't flick them into the forest, don't feed wildlife, and make sure you're careful around the cliffs and in the backyard. It kind of slopes down at night, so probably don't go poking around in the backyard when it's only moonlight because so many people fall every year. It was just your basic security briefing. But one thing stuck out to us being 13 13-year-old boys that we found kind of exciting. Once we were fully checked in and were completely debriefed, he opened the barrier arm, but he said one last thing. He said, watch out for deers and bears on the way up, because we got there later in the day and the sun was going down, and apparently the wildlife was very active at this time, so we didn't want to drive fast up the mountain because there was deers and bears crossing the road. So me and Adam immediately got so excited that we might potentially see a bear on the way up this mountain. So we're looking out the windows and we're just scoping to see if we could find a bear. We didn't care too much about deer. We see deer all the time, but there was something about seeing a black bear that just really excited us. So we're slowly driving up this mountain as the sun's going down, and Adam's parents are looking for the turn to get into where our cabin is, and almost immediately we saw a couple deer crossing the road, but that's not what we were looking for. We were looking for a bear, and we actually managed to see one as we were going up. It was right at the edge of the road, not crossing the road, not in the middle of our headlights, but messing around with something right off the side of the road about 2 miles before our cabin. But if I'm being candid with you, it was very lackluster. It was a black bear. It was a small black bear. Looked like it might have been a baby, probably nothing over 300 pounds, and it didn't nearly live up to our expectations of what we were expecting to see. And I remember thinking, I always thought bears were bigger than that. I had this image of bears in my mind that they were just this massive creatures. Even black bears, I didn't really know the difference between grizzly, brown, and black. And the little measly black bear that we saw on the side of the road wasn't even bigger than some large dogs. So even though we were disappointed, at least the cabin lived up to the hype. We pull into this large driveway to this massive wooden cabin. It was like something that I'd never seen before. I didn't even know they built wooden cabins like that. Literally every part of the structure was beautiful wood, and this place was massive, but the outside didn't even do the interior justice. And right when we pulled up, we all hopped out of the car, popped open the front door, and started exploring this massive wooden cabin. I'm calling it a cabin. You might as well call it a lodge with how large this thing was. There was a massive living room, an awesome kitchen. All the bedrooms were upstairs, and we had a bunk bed bedroom, and it even had a den that doubled as a game room that had access to this awesome wraparound porch, and the wraparound porch looked over a cliffside that had luscious woods. Everything about this place was exactly what you're looking for when you're trying to do a getaway in the mountains. Not to mention the entire place smelt like cedar. So like I said, when we arrived there, it was right about nighttime, and we had just done a long road trip, so we were all ready to shower and go to sleep because we had a massive agenda the next day. Adam's mom had an awesome itinerary, and she decided to take us on a hike the very next morning nearby. I believe the hike was called Laurel Falls. It was just a couple miles away from Sevierville, and it was a very quick drive and not that hard of a hike, and all of the kids would enjoy it. So we get there and we're excited to knock out this hike because the vacation just started. And again, when we arrived there, the person that is in charge of briefing people of all the dangers of the area lets us know that there's a lot of black bears in the area and we should probably look out for them. So naturally, being little 13-year-old delinquents, me and Adam are excited that we have another chance to see a bear. So we're just looking out for them. We want a black bear to cross our paths, and we want it to be bigger than the day before. But unfortunately for us and our adolescent moronic minds, we didn't come across a black bear, which is actually a blessing. But we were disappointed in that. We just enjoyed the nice hike and we had a pleasant time, which should have been enough for us. But it wasn't enough for us. We finished the hike and all we could still think about was that there's black bears in the area. We were honed in on the fact that we wanted to see a big bear because we were 13-year-old idiots. So after we finished the hike, we hop in the car and Adam's mom takes us back to town, and we're allowed to go souvenir shopping and grab little trinkets, anything that we think would be fun over the vacation. We grab a little bit of food, and then Adam and I are allowed to go spend some of our allowance money that we had saved up on whatever we wanted. So we started going from shop to shop until we found exactly what we were looking for that fit the narrative of our weekend. And we happened to come across BB guns. So we spent all of our allowance on 2 BB guns. We justified buying them because we told his parents that we were going to do shooting competitions and aim competitions in the game room that evening. But we had a slight ulterior motive. In the back of our minds, we were still thinking about these black bears. And that motive intensified when we got back to the base of the mountain and had another run-in with this property manager before he let us up the mountain. We pulled up to his cabin and he came out to give us another warning. We thought that he was going to recognize us and just let us through because all the warnings were over. But he leaned into the window and let Adam's mom know that there was something else in the area that we need to be aware of. He sternly told the entire car of people that there was an 800-pound black bear that was considered aggressive in the area, and we shouldn't eat outside or spend much time outside of the cabin, let alone on the wraparound porch that evening. He was clearly not joking. He was being very stern with us and very clear with the directions. And 800 pounds sounds a lot bigger than the one we saw the previous evening. And adding that it was also considered aggressive wasn't a great addition either. And these details should have scared us. They should have gotten our minds off the idea of wanting to see a bear, but we were 13 years old and we were incredibly naive. When you're that age, you have no gauge of morality or consequences. You feel invincible, and for some reason, an 800-pound black bear that's considered aggressive in the area was exciting to us. We thought it was the coolest thing in the world that we were staying somewhere dangerous. We even shot looks at each other after he said it, like, yo, that just made the weekend better. And now that we had our BB guns, our little stupid 13-year-old minds started concocting a moronic plan. So that night, the parents had decided to take Adam's sisters, the young girls, into town for ice cream and live music. And Adam and I had asked if we could stay at the cabin while they were out there and just play in the game room and wait for them to bring food back to us and just have some alone time in the cabin to enjoy it. They had understood that we didn't want to go out again because we had already done that early morning hike and we spent the afternoon in town. Plus the game room had air hockey, a pinball machine, darts, a GameCube with Mario Kart and Smash Bros, and not to mention our brand new BB guns for target practice. There was so much for us to do at the house, and they were only planning on being gone for a couple hours, and it's not like this was the first time Adam and I were at a house by ourselves. We were 13, we were pretty used to it at that point. They simply told us to not go outside and not go on the porch, just like the property manager had told us. And they had no reason to think we would do that because there were so many distractions for us. This cabin, this lodge was so amazing. There were so many things to distract us, so many things for us to do, but they didn't take into account that we were delusional 13-year-olds, completely in our own world, creating our own narrative, trying to make memories together on this vacation. And they really underestimated how willing we were to bend the rules while they were gone in order to have a good time and do something that excited us. And I'm not proud of this, by the way. I'm just being honest with how young boys think. I'm not trying to justify irresponsible actions. There's something about that portion of a young boy's life that comes with a false sense of invincibility and this urge to impress your friends. All young boys do it. Who is willing to do the wildest thing? Who's the toughest? Who's the bravest? It's just part of young boys' nature. You eventually grow and learn that discernment, responsible risk management, and security in yourself, so strong that you have nothing to prove to anybody, is what actually makes you the toughest and the bravest. But I hadn't gotten there in my life yet. I was young and wild and irresponsible. I wanted to impress my friend, and my friend wanted to impress me. And the common theme this weekend that we could use to impress each other with who is less scared of the black bears in the area. So after his family left, we waited about 30 minutes to make sure that they were actually gone before we started playing with fire. First, we were a little bit responsible. We checked to see if our BB guns worked, and we did a little bit of target practice to make sure that we could actually hit what we were aiming for, like we said we were going to do. But we both knew what we were actually preparing to do. We both knew what the actual plan for tonight was, and we knew we only had a couple hours to accomplish it. We both knew why we bought those BB guns, and we both knew exactly how we were going to bend the rules that they gave us. So once we were absolutely positive that they were gone and they weren't going to come back for a few hours, we started to search all of the cabinets for the perfect bait. Our plan was to lure a black bear in and shoot it with BB guns to prove to each other that we weren't scared of it. I'm going to take a moment right now to let you know how stupid I think that plan is. And on top of that, how cruel that plan is. To lure a wild animal in with food and then shoot it with a BB gun. It's just cruel. You don't need to berate me in the comments. I'm ashamed of it to the point where I'm willing to share it with you and express the flaws of those actions. Nothing about this plan would make sense to an adult. Also, nothing about this plan would make sense to a fully developed human with empathy. But at the time, being a 13-year-old kid, it felt like a game. It felt like a fun, dangerous game. It really got our adrenaline going, and we were riding off the high of being on a vacation, and it felt like there was going to be zero consequences. We didn't realize that there's consequences in life. Our foolproof plan was to put a pile of beef jerky onto the porch and open two of the windows just a couple inches so we could stick the barrel of our BB guns out of it, pointing at the pile of bait, and just sit there and wait for the bear to come. And the way that we were going to get around the rule about not going on the porch like his parents said was to open the door wide, put my toes right at the edge of the door frame, hold Adam's arm with one hand, and lean as far as I can as I'm dropping a pile of beef jerky into the center of the porch, because then I technically didn't go on the porch. So that's exactly what we did. So I leaned out of this porch door like I was doing the Michael Jackson anti-gravity tilt and set up a pile of beef jerky bait to lure a black bear in. So once the beef jerky was there, we slid open two of the adjacent windows, put chairs up against the window, and waited at our posts. We figured that the chairs would block the majority of our body so whatever animals came up wouldn't actually be able to see us. And then we just waited, and we even started making fake animal calls out of the windows to try to lure animals towards us. We had no idea what animal calls actually work. We were just we were playing a game. We were making random sounds that we thought bears might like, because tonight like we were bear hunters, and at that exact moment it felt so fun and cool. But everything's all fun and cool until a bear actually shows up. And we were just making calls out of the window for over an hour until we heard our first source of a sound somewhere outside on the porch, our first indication of movement. In my heart, I just thought it was going to be a bear. I knew it was going to be a bear, and I was so excited to see it. And I remember just thinking, I hope this one is bigger than the one that we saw on the way up the mountain the first day. It was getting nice and dark, and we felt like it was the perfect setting to have some type of wildlife, maybe a bear, approach us and take the bait. Everything seemed like it was going perfectly. And from the dark corner of the wraparound porch, I was able to finally see something, because we only had light illuminating where our bait was. The edges of the porch were completely pitch black at this point, and I was able to see two little beady eyes climb up the porch, reveal themselves, and start approaching our bait. And the first thing that I thought was a sense of disappointment. I was immediately so upset because the first thing that came to my mind was, oh no, this thing is smaller than the first one. But that thought only lasted a couple moments, because eventually those two little beady eyes revealed themselves from the darkness, and it was just a little itty bitty raccoon looking for some beef jerky. We were initially disappointed, but we were trying to stay optimistic about the situation, and in this case, at least our bait worked. At least we caught something. At least the scent of the beef jerky is wafting into the forest and some of the animals are smelling it. Not to mention, our calls out the windows were working. It wasn't scaring off wildlife. We felt like the calls were attracting wildlife. Everything was going swimmingly. Even though it was a raccoon, it seemed like it was an absolute win. It was working. We got a Costco-sized bag of beef jerky in bulk, ready to re-up this pile once this raccoon takes its fill, and then we just wait for our next victim. And then we were also a little optimistic, because in our minds, the raccoon was also bait. So if a bear shows up, it sees beef jerky and a raccoon, that's 2 in 1. So in our little silly brains, we're even more likely to get a bear. And for some reason, we couldn't justify shooting the raccoon with BB guns, because we felt like it was bullying a harmless animal. But there was something about shooting a bear with a BB gun that felt cool and dangerous, and the raccoon was also serving as bait, so we let him just enjoy his beef jerky calmly. So we let our little trash panda stick around and enjoy his meal as we waited for the real prize to come upon us. So we're just sitting around and waiting for about 10 minutes, watching this raccoon eat our entire stack of beef jerky, while we're trying to be as silent as we possibly could so we didn't spook our secondary bait. But then randomly we see it stand up on its hind legs, look around, start wiggling its ears and sniffing the air as if it's sensing something approaching. Then we heard one loud creak as if something grabbed onto the railing of the porch, and at that same moment, the raccoon darted off into the darkness. And at the time, our adrenaline is pumping. Everything's going perfect. It feels like we're doing something good. It feels like we're accomplishing something. Adam and I had a quick exchange of words, asking if we should try to re-up the pile before it gets here. But we decided against it, and we decided to stay on our posts, because if it's already on the porch, it might be a little too close for us to re-up. We're not willing to take that risk. Let's stay where we're at. And there's still a little bit of the beef jerky left, so if it smells something, it will still approach that, even though it's a little morsel. And whatever made that sound grabbing the porch had clearly made its way onto the porch and was now walking over to our bait. It was working. It was approaching our trap. It smelt the beef jerky, or it smelt the raccoon, or it heard our calls out the window. Whatever it was happening, it was here, and we were excited about it. And whatever this was sounded way bigger than the raccoon, because you could hear it lumbering towards us on the wraparound porch. You could hear the wood of the porch bending with each step from the weight of whatever this animal was. And I remember having an odd thought. I thought, whatever this was, it might even be a donkey or a horse, with the sound of the clanking from every step it took. It sounded almost as if it had hooves, as if something hard was hitting the porch with each lumbering step, but nothing could prepare us for what emerged from the dark corner of that porch. The first thing we saw was a set of eyes, the same way we saw the raccoon's eyes, but you can't really gauge its size by its eyes. So we could hear it lumbering over, we could see its eyes, we knew where it was, so we're waiting to see it reveal itself into the light and start eating from our trap. This wasn't a raccoon, this wasn't a horse or a donkey, and this wasn't a bear. It was something that we had never seen before. Hey guys, just taking a quick break from this story. I wanted to let you guys know that we're dropping another merchandise drop because the last one went so well. This time it is the Joshua Tree merch. Take a look. I think it's pretty sweet. If you can't afford the merchandise, don't even worry about it. Just watch the video. Just like the video. It's all good. We just want to give free content to you guys. Some people ask us to make merchandise, so we're making it for them. We only make about 75 of these, so if you really want them, grab one. We want to spend our time making free videos for you, not packaging merch all the time. But we think this design is really cool and we think you guys will like it, and hopefully it sells out just like last time. Back to the show. And the clanking sound that it was making lumbering over on the porch wasn't from hooves. This thing had 4-inch claws that you could hear hitting the wood of the porch with every step that it took. They were so large that I mistook the sound as if they were full horse hooves. And it had absolutely no fur on its body. It was completely bald, and the skin on it was somewhere in between a naked mole rat and a rhino. It looked kind of saggy like a mole rat, but it was also dark like a dark gray, and it looked rough to the touch, thick like a rhino. And its eyes were really close together with a short snout in between them, almost like one of those compact large hyena mouths. And initially I thought, is it a hyena or is it like some type of large badger, until I saw the back end of its body when its full body was illuminated. The head and the front arms and paws were slim and looked kind of dangerous, and I don't know how else to say this, but once I saw the back end of its body, it looked kind of chubby. Its front arms and shoulders were kind of jacked and looked very capable, but its back legs were like short and stubby, kind of like a chimpanzee. And the back end of its body was much larger than the front half, almost how the bottom half of a kangaroo is so disproportionately sized from the top half. And again, it had no fur whatsoever. I'd never seen an animal like this, and like I said, my initial thoughts were, is this a hyena? Or I just didn't know where to place this animal. I didn't know how to categorize it. So my mind's jumping around. I'm like, is this some type of large badger? I mean, it kind of looks like one, but not really, because this thing was massive. It was so big. And then my very next 13-year-old thought was about something that I learned in school. I remember learning about extinct animals, and one that stood out to me in the textbooks was a giant ground sloth. They were extinct, massive creatures that moved really, really slow, and they had really long claws on the front and back legs, accompanied with a very unathletic, unassuming body type. And I remember the teacher told us that these things went extinct, but they were originally from North America. So this is how stupid a 13-year-old boy is. This is what my brain jumped to. I got excited because I thought that we just found an extinct animal. This was going better than I ever could have imagined. I felt like Forrest Galante finding the last living thylacine. And you also have to put into consideration, when you think about how silly my mindset was the fact that I was a kid that was raised on catching every Pokemon and collecting Yu-Gi-Oh cards and duel monsters and watching Digimon. I had a warped idea of what wildlife was, what exotic creatures were, and for some reason I blended real life animals and those cartoons together. Ash Ketchum collected rare Pokemon. That's what he did. That's a character that I looked up to. Yugi Muto collected duel monsters. That was a character I looked up to. And I thought that I had just found an extinct giant North American sloth, and I couldn't have been more excited about it. And my 13-year-old brain categorized this animal, put it into the same reward system that went off when I would catch a rare Pokemon on my Nintendo DS. And nothing in me felt like we were in real danger until we let off our BB guns. Because the plan was to lure it in, shoot it with our BB guns, and maybe catch it. That's how stupid we were. And I heard what type of sound it made. It wasn't a growl, it wasn't a roar, it wasn't a hiss. It was different from any type of sound I've ever heard from an animal. And it sounded like it was in a state of anger. It sounded as if it was breathing through its teeth, and I saw foam pouring out of each side of its mouth. The sound it was making was kind of like this. When the BB guns went off and the BBs actually finally hit it, it spastically jerked backwards. And I thought it was going to run away and we were going to be able to start celebrating catching a rare animal. But it didn't move how I thought it was going to move. I thought it was going to scurry off back into the darkness and we're going to be jumping around and celebrating. But it just started whipping its head around and backpedaling, and it stood up onto its hind legs, and it was aggressively looking for what caused its source of pain. It went from lumbering slowly and being unathletic looking and borderline chubby to standing up, spreading out, and aggressively looking around as if it was capable of very serious damage. It was standing on its hind legs effortlessly, and it's just standing there with seething white foam coming out of its teeth and its paws with its massive claws just hanging in front of it. And it saw us. It saw us through the window, and it saw that we did it. And all of the joy that was in me from my delusional mindset, what I thought we were accomplishing here, completely washed away. I hopped off the chair that I was kneeling on, and once I was was looking at it through these glass doors, I realized just how tall this thing was. I knew it was big, I knew it was heavy, but once it stood up and stretched out, I realized that this thing had to have been 8 feet tall. We immediately slammed the windows that we had the barrel of our BB gun sticking out of, and we backed up, and we're just staring at this massive North American ground sloth standing on its hind legs outside of these bay windows on this wraparound porch. And then we watched it slouch back down onto all fours and lumber up to the bay doors. We were too scared to move at that point. We were just staring at this thing. And I remember thinking that there's no way that it could get inside. There's no way for animals to be able to get into houses. Again, delusional mindset of a 13-year-old. I didn't have a gauge of what the real world was like. But this thing got up to the bay doors, went back up onto its hind legs while it's staring at us aggressively, and started jostling the handle of the door. And its claws are just clanking against the metal, and it's moving it as if it knows exactly how to open a door. Its hand was just a little bit too big to do it efficiently. So even though it knew what to do, it just wasn't coordinated with the action. And every inch of my body opened up into a cold sweat once I saw it touching the handle. Because I knew that we opened that bay door to tilt forward and put the beef jerky out on the porch, and I don't remember locking it. I wasn't positive if we locked it, but I knew we didn't lock it when I saw the door open an inch. We were so lucky that this thing didn't come blasting through the door at that very second. It definitely knew the handle was the way to open the door, but it didn't know if it was a push or a pull. It just knew that the handle was the source of opening the door. It was trying to push for the most part, but I noticed that it got the handle down and it was trying to reset, but in that time, the claw hooked onto the handle and he pulled it for a split second and the door opened about an inch, but it immediately pushed it closed on accident and then continued to jostle with the handle. And I knew that once it saw the door open that way, that this was the only time that it was going to make that mistake. Now it knew it was a pull, so we only had a couple moments to flee from where we were and get behind another door that was locked. So we dropped the BB guns on the floor, for some reason thinking that dropping the weapons that we shot it with would for some reason calm down this animal. So we frantically ran out of the game room / den, up a small set of stairs onto the main floor of the house, just to get some distance from this thing, but we still wanted to be able to see it and see down into the den and through the room to the bay doors of when this thing is actually coming in. But by the time I looked back, this thing was already inside, it had already pulled the bay door open, and it was bashing through furniture on its way aggressively, seething through its teeth, pursuing us. So instinctually, we just keep it moving, and we climb a staircase to our right that takes us into the bedroom area of the house, and we just choose a random bedroom on the second floor and slam the door behind us and lock it. So we back up to the other end of the room and we start shooting looks at each other just to see if either one of us had a plan, but both of us were drawing a blank, and we didn't have any time to have any dialogue. This thing was in the house and chasing us. We could hear it barreling up the stairs already, so our only option was to turn around and start checking the windows. We needed to see if there was any option to escape through them, to see if there was any way out of this room, because the thin wooden door behind us definitely wasn't going to hold that thing. And the first two windows that we checked were complete free falls. There was nothing we could do but jump out of them and hope it didn't jump with us. But the third window we checked was in arm's reach of the balcony of the neighboring bedroom. But the balcony wasn't directly under the window. We couldn't climb out the window onto the balcony. We were going to have to almost launch ourselves out of this window, grab a hold of the balcony railing, and pull ourselves up. But again, the major issue here was that thing was still in the hallway, and we still have a locked door between us and it. But if we climb to that other balcony right now, the bedroom door of that room might be wide open. We didn't have time to check when we were running into this first room. We don't know if the other room's door was open, and if we climb onto that balcony, then that door's open and it could get right to us. So we have to sit there and wait to see if this thing is going to be able to get through this door before we even attempt to escape to the other balcony. Because even though it knows that we're in this room, it might be more dangerous to go to the other room than it is to stay here. At least that's what I thought for 5 seconds until that thing got up to the door of the room that we were in. And it wasn't delicately jostling the handle of this door. It's like it didn't even slow down. It ripped its way up the staircase, didn't hesitate for a second, and threw its entire weight into this door, and it almost knocked it off the hinges. The frame of the entire door almost came out of the wall with the amount of force it put into it. Some of the wood even even splintered upon its initial impact, and I was able to see its figure through the gaps in the wood. This thing was on an absolute tirade. We pissed it off and it was coming after us. I don't know if this is just how this animal acts or if we really pissed it off with the BB gun, but it is clearly honed in on us and pursuing us at all costs. It was clear immediately that this thing was going to make it through this door, so we had to get through this window frame and onto the other balcony as soon as we possibly could. And I didn't have any time to think about or calculate how I was going to go about this, because if I took too long, Adam wouldn't have time to get over to the balcony himself. Because if I wait until this thing bursts through the door before I start trying, before I'm over to the balcony, he's still going to be there. He's going to get caught by this thing. So I have to make a move before this thing gets through the door so he has time to make his move. So I had to take this risk prematurely. I had to climb over this balcony where this other door might be open. So I climb up onto the window frame, I get my knees to my chest, and I put my hands on both sides of this frame, and I have my feet on the bottom of the window frame perched like a bird as I'm trying to lean forward to get my head out of the frame so I could push off and reach both hands to grab onto the opposing railing of the balcony. And I'm doing this all with a 30-foot drop beneath me into the steep rocky terrain of the Smoky Mountains. So I launch myself off this frame and I grab onto that railing like it owes me money, and I rip myself up this balcony, scraping my face off of the wooden frame until I could get one of my arms over the railing and get my forearm on the other side to take some pressure off the weight on my hands. And once I had my first forearm over, I was able to get my chin over the railing, and that relieved even more of my weight. I got my other forearm over and I was relieved that I definitely wasn't going to fall. I felt pretty secure that I was going to make it to the other side. But at that very same moment, Adam yelled at me to hurry up because this thing was getting through the door. I needed to get out of the way so Adam had room to make the leap himself. Otherwise, this thing was going to barrel through that door, leave it in complete splinters, and tear Adam limb from limb. So I wiggled my way up until the railing was at my belly button, and I just threw myself over, not even attempting to break my fall, just so I could get out of the way for my friend. And the second my head hit the floor of the balcony, I also heard the door frame be completely removed from the hinges in the other room. And I heard an audible gasp from Adam as if he was terrified that thing had made it into the room, and he had to rush and launch himself over this 30-foot drop with no time to prepare or try to find his balance. And I heard his hands slap off the railing, and I got to my feet as fast as I could, ready to grab my friend's shirt to try to yank him over the railing to get away from this thing. But I looked at the railing and I didn't see his fingers curling over it. They slapped off the railing and he free-falled to the ground. His hands must have slipped and he fell from the second-story window, and I wasn't able to go over the railing and look over down to where he fell, or even see if he was okay, because this thing was already aggressively crawling through the window, reaching its massive arm with massive claws towards the balcony railing. I couldn't wait there. I couldn't lean over and get closer to this thing to see if my friend was okay. This thing had murder in its eyes. It was tearing itself through that window frame, desperately trying to get to this balcony, to get to me, and it wasn't going to stop until it got me or both of us. And it has already accomplished getting one of us to fall out of a window. I have no idea what kind of state Adam is in on the ground below. And this thing, once it got to the window, it didn't even hesitate to start pursuing me. It wasn't scared of the height. It didn't seem like it was concerned with its own well-being. It was only concerned with getting to me. But this thing was so big that it was having a hard time getting through this window frame and reaching over to the railing with good balance. So I had a couple moments to think, and the first thing that came to my mind was to open these sliding doors that led to the balcony that I was standing on, and just step through them and close them behind me and lock them, while this thing was still in limbo in between the window frame and the balcony. And I knew that this thing just tore through a wooden door, so it definitely wouldn't have any issues breaking these sliding glass doors. But instinctively, putting any type of barrier between me and it just felt right. I was also optimistic that it might hurt itself going through a glass door, and maybe it knew that, and that's why it was jostling the outside handle, because that door was also glass, so maybe it only bashed through wooden doors. And I locked these sliding doors, so if it got to the balcony, maybe I could trap it there. So once I had that sliding door locked, I waited in that room looking through this glass door until its arm got fully onto the balcony, as if it was fully committing on climbing through that window and getting over, before I left that room, whipped around to the room that it came from, and slammed that window closed, hoping that this was going to trap it on this balcony. Once I had slammed that window closed, internally I was trying to think if I should stay by this window in case it gets through that glass door, so I could climb out this window again and play some type of catch me if you can while keeping a couple walls between us, because it took so long for this thing to get through this window to the balcony. I could just keep circling until it loses interest invest in me. But then I quickly remembered that if this thing broke those glass doors from the balcony, this thing would be able to catch up to me so quickly, and I would be risking myself over and over again trying to launch myself from that window frame to the balcony. And its arm was long enough that if it got to the window, it could reach me if I was still struggling trying to climb up. It was a horrible idea to stay there. And I realized that I was wasting time standing by this window, and at that exact same moment, I faintly heard Adam calling for help from the ground below outside of this window. And I took one last peek out of the window to see where this thing was. I wasn't able to see Adam below, but I just wanted to gauge where it was before I ran out of the room. And I realized very quickly that I wasn't the only one that heard Adam call for help. That thing heard him too, and its attention was no longer on the glass balcony doors that I had just closed behind me. Its attention was on Adam calling for help from the ground below. It must have seemed like a much easier option for this thing. Something is injured on the ground instead of having to chase me through glass doors through this house that it's too big for. It could just go for the whimpering injured one that's already outside. I could see it looking over the edge of the balcony confused down at Adam, so I knew that I needed to get to Adam first before it could find its way out or find its way down. So I took off running down the stairs and out the front door, and once I was outside, I circled around the cabin to the side that I knew he fell, the quickest route that I could get to him, because I knew that every second counted. And when I turned the corner, I was hoping and praying to see that thing confused and stuck on that balcony. But there was something different about this thing. It seemed like it was a high-level problem solver. It seemed as if it was capable of things that animals shouldn't be capable of. This thing was not confused, it was calculated, and it was already making its way down one of the thick pillars of the balcony. It went down backwards. It put its back feet down first and used its front arms and claws to hug the pillar as its back legs slowly backpedaled down this wooden pillar. This thing was massive. It shouldn't be able to climb like that. It shouldn't be this coordinated when it's such a large animal. And Adam was already crawling towards me. Clearly he had a busted ankle or knee, but it didn't seem like there was any other major injuries other than that. He wasn't bleeding, he didn't seem concussed, it just seemed like one of his sticks wasn't working. But this thing was already coming down this pillar, and I had no idea how I was going to get Adam to safety. Even if I could get him inside, this thing knows how to get inside, and he's incapable of running anymore. Not to mention, I have no idea how fast this thing is. I haven't seen it run yet. I saw it kind of scurry through the living room and bash into furniture, but I haven't seen it in an all-out sprint. I realized that we can't go into the forest. We can't try to run away from this thing because Adam is just hopping. I get him to his feet and I have him hop with me to the back door of the cabin because our only option is to go back inside and to keep trying to put barriers between us and it, because I'm not trying to find out how fast it is. So we get to this back door, I get both of us through it and I lock it behind us, and apparently this thing was already down the pillar. It had already scaled a 30-foot drop of a wooden pillar. This massive animal had made its way to the ground elegantly and then threw itself into the back door as if it was still relentlessly pursuing us. And the only thing on our side at this point is the fact that this back door is an exterior door and it's made of some type of metal, and this thing is having a much harder time knocking it down and barreling its way through it because of what material it's made of. But the way that this thing is tearing at this back door with sheer power and force, I'm not confident that it's not going to get through it eventually. And Adam is freaking out because he wants to start to tend to his injuries, but I can't allow him to do that. I make him continue hopping through the house to try to get to the main area of the house where there's a phone so we could call somebody. And then once we call somebody for help, we just find somewhere small where we could barricade ourselves where this thing can't get to us. And I hear this thing just continuing to claw and try to gnaw through this back exterior door as we're fleeing through the house into the kitchen. And even though I could hear it and I know that it's still back by that back door, part of me thinks that it's going to remember the door that it came through initially, and it's going to come barreling through the game room again, and we're going to have to try to get upstairs and do the same thing all over again. So even though we were away from it, nowhere in the house felt safe. We knew that it could breach this house. We were barely one step ahead of this thing. We were barely capable of keeping a wall or a door between us. And I don't know how much longer we could keep it up, because eventually there's not going to be a door left in this house. And I don't like our odds of getting away from this thing in the woods because of the shape that Adam's leg is in. So we need to call somebody. We need help. So we get to the kitchen where there's a landline on a counter, and I grab that thing like it is my only hope. And right as I'm holding this phone in front of my face, ready to dial 911, I see behind the phone a car drive into the driveway, and it's Adam's parents and sisters coming home from dinner. They are pulling up expecting to come into a calm situation to find us in this beautiful cabin, happy and excited and being on vacation, and we're all about to eat a beautiful dinner together, enjoying our trip. And they have no idea that they just drove into an extremely dangerous situation that we created. In hindsight, it probably would have been a better idea to signal to them to stay in their car, but I was so terrified that all I wanted was to be around adults. And I knew that that thing was going to get through that back door any second, so there was really no point in me staying in the house. I had to go to them anyway. So I grab Adam again, and he's hopping next to me. We fly through that front door, begging for help, leading into the driveway as his entire family is exiting their car. And the reason we did that was because as a 13-year-old, you just feel like adults could end a situation. Once they know about it, they know how to handle it, and if we're with them, they'll be able to make this stop. You just feel like whatever dad is there knows the solution, and whatever animal this is going to be scared of him because everybody's scared of their dad. And they weren't expecting to see us in that state. They had no context as to what was going on, and Adam is hopping, and we both looked terrified. And we weren't doing a good job communicating what had happened. We weren't able to express that this situation was still going on. They just saw that their son was hurt, and his friend was carrying him and equally as scared. But our goal, Adam and I's goal, was to just get into this car so we could drive away from this thing. But his parents had no idea what was happening, and the whole family was already out of the car, so they rushed towards us. So Adam and I are shouting at them to get back in the car, but his parents are going like, "Stop. What happened? Let me see your leg. Stop right here. Sit down." They're trying to evaluate the situation and get answers, but we're saying just get in the car because we think that Adam's injury is so bad that we need to be rushed to the ER, but it might be a sprained ankle, and they want to assess the situation before doing anything. Little do they know, there's a creature pursuing us so aggressively, and it's so large that the entire family is in danger. But it didn't come barreling through the house and through the front door. In fact, it didn't even make it into the exterior back door. It heard us come out of the front of the cabin, and it heard us shouting at Adam's family. So it stopped trying to get into the back door, and it circled around the house to the source of the sound. So as I'm looking up at Adam's dad and I'm yelling at him to get back into the car, I see him look through me and past me at something behind me. And his resistance to assess the situation in the driveway faded away in an instant once he saw what we were shouting about. His dad's strength kicked in, and he just grabbed Adam by the waist, lifted him off the ground, marched him to the minivan, which still had its sliding door wide open, and threw him into the back seat as he's commanding the rest of the family to pile into the seat with him. I didn't even have to look behind me to know that it was coming because I could hear it ripping into the ground behind us, pursuing us, and I could hear those same seething breaths ripping out from behind its teeth with every single step that it took. So we all pile into the back seat of this minivan as his dad whips around to the front seat to pilot this car. And this minivan is one of those doors that you can't close manually fast. You have to hit the handle or push the button, and it just slowly closes like this. So this thing is closing painfully slow in a situation as dramatic as this. But the only benefit of this was that everybody was pressed back to the other side of the van and got a really good look at the thing that was pursuing us through the window as the door was closing. So everybody was aware of how much danger we were actually in and how big and ferocious this thing actually was. We were no longer in a situation where we had to convince people to be as scared as we were. They saw it, and they were as scared as we were. But even when the minivan door secured closed and Adam's dad got into the driver's seat, threw it into drive, and got the wheels slightly moving, this nightmare sloth didn't slow down. It threw itself into the back end of the minivan and gave everybody some healthy whiplash, and it rocked the entire vehicle with the amount of force that it generated by slamming its body into it. Luckily, it didn't hit any of the windows because it would have shattered for sure on that first sprint, but there was clearly going to be a massive dent on the side of this car. And that wasn't the end of it. This thing was attacking the car as if it was some type of large prey like a bison, and it was just wrapped around the back end as if it was trying to take down a buffalo. It was gripping the vehicle with its front paws and its back claws, gnawing at it as we were driving away. It was completely latched onto the vehicle, and it was doing everything in its power to try to get inside of it to us. And everybody in the back seat was screaming at Adam's dad to do something, to make some type of maneuver to try to get it off the back end of the vehicle. But he didn't know what else to do other than start driving downhill towards the base of the mountain. It's not like this thing was on the side of the car where you could sideswipe something in an attempt to get it off. You would have to throw it into reverse and back it into something to try to smush it because it was on the back end of the car. And I could tell that Adam's dad was trying to find an alternative strategy, because throwing it into reverse and smashing it into something might break a window, it might not kill it, and it makes it easier for it to get in. I didn't know exactly what he was planning to do, but he started doing slight swerves left and right, and I assumed he was trying to wiggle it off the back. But I didn't realize until the third time he did it that he was actually attempting to hit potholes, to make jarring movements to try to knock it off the back end. The first one that he hit must have been kind of small, but the jarring movement definitely almost knocked this thing off. So he started to speed up a little bit more and was swerving even into the oncoming traffic lane to try to hit any hole that he possibly could. And he finally hit one that had the perfect type of bounce on one of the back wheels that it made such a jarring movement that this thing fell off. And we watched this thing hit the concrete and roll about 6 or 7 times. I was almost able to exhale and turn my attention towards my injured friend, but it was as if this thing didn't even feel the severe fall that it just took, because the moment it stopped tumbling, it was back on its feet and hauling ass back towards our car again. And remember, we were in a minivan, we're not in a sports car, and we just went over a pothole that clearly damaged one of our wheels. This thing isn't a getaway vehicle. The car isn't running well initially, plus we're going downhill on a mountain, so it's not like we could get up to 80 miles an hour. There's hard turns, there's oncoming traffic, there's cliffs. You can't go 80 miles an hour here. We had to go at a somewhat responsible speed, so we got up to 40 miles an hour, and that already felt irresponsible with how winding these roads were and these hard turns where you can't see oncoming traffic. Even 40 miles an hour felt irresponsible. So I look back, and this hairless devil mole rat is able to keep up with our vehicle that's going 40 miles an hour. It's not faster than our vehicle. It's not running 60 miles an hour like a cheetah, but it's definitely able to keep up as if it's running like a steady 35, and it's showing no signs of stopping its pursuit of us. It seems as motivated as ever to chase down this vehicle and tear through its doors and then tear through us. And none of us are even able to talk to each other because this thing is still close to us. We're not able to communicate with each other. We're not able to make up a game plan because we're all so fear-ridden. And I could see in the rearview mirror that Adam's dad is trying to go back and forth between focusing on this thing and focusing on the road. And he's doing this fine balance of not whipping around corners irresponsibly, leading us into a head-on collision, but also speeding up when he has to when this thing is closing in on us. Mind you, we're also going downhill, so this thing is having an easier time running, and we have to slowly hit our brakes around every turn, so it keeps getting close to us, and then in some stretches we could pull away from it, but every time we have to slow down, it closes the gap. But as we're getting close to the base of the mountain, it does seem like it's starting to slow down. It's not stopping exactly, but we're getting a little bit more distance from it, and we have more of a straightaway leading up to that property manager's cabin. We were in the final stretch to that cabin where the property manager is, where that security barrier is, and Adam's dad is just holding down on his horn, trying to get the attention of the man that is in that cabin. We had about 20 to 40 yards of distance between us and that thing, so he had to let this guy know before we pulled up that we were coming and this thing was coming. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to slow down and have a nice conversation briefing the property manager about what happened. We know that this thing is still coming, so as we are driving up to his little cabin, we could see that the property manager is sticking his head out, hearing Adam's dad holding down on the horn. I'm assuming that he's doing that to get the guy's attention to open the security barrier so we could get onto the road so we could drive faster away from this thing. But that's not what he was doing. I wasn't considering that if this thing sees the property manager, he's alone, there's only one door it has to get through, and there's no chance he's going to survive. So we're pulling up, the property manager is fully out of his cabin, trying to see what we're making a fuss about. So we screech to a halt next to him. Adam's dad starts opening the window to try to tell him to look back, but he didn't even need to. He saw what we were running from. The only thing Adam's dad was able to get out of his mouth was, "I don't know what that thing is, get in the car." Adam's dad was clearly trying to save the property manager, and he was probably just going to drive through the security barrier or try to get around it. But apparently, the property manager didn't need saving. That man stood his ground, put his hand on his pistol, whipped it out, and started walking towards this thing. And we're watching in terror through these minivan windows, this property manager having a standoff with this massive, horrifying, aggressive creature. And it's just barreling downhill, gaining momentum towards this guy. But to be candid, that property manager was an absolute gangster. He squared his feet, lifted his pistol with both hands, looked through his iron sight, and just stood there steady, waiting for that thing to come into range before unloading a full clip into it. He didn't stop pulling that trigger until it was completely lifeless, and I watched this thing skid to a halt as the property manager started to approach it, while he's reloading his clip just in case he has to double tap it. But that wasn't the case. He finished the job with the first clip, and whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to be hurting anybody anytime soon. And Adam's dad got out of the vehicle first, and we're all looking at them, and I could tell that he's having a conversation about what the next step in this situation is. Because clearly a firearm just went off, and something was killed, so we don't know what the protocol is after this. But once Adam's dad saw that it was actually dead, and he got confirmation from the property manager that it was safe to exit the vehicle, he asked us all to get out of the car. And as we're walking up to this thing, my child brain was thinking that this was going to be some massive event because we just killed some mysterious unknown creature that I thought might be the extinct giant sloth or the real chupacabra, like we found it. I thought the men in black or military was about to show up and the entire area was going to be taped off because of this incredible discovery. Because even up close, upon further inspection, while this thing wasn't moving, this thing looked like an otherworldly ultra predator, and the things that it was capable of didn't make any sense. It could stand on its hind legs, it could open doors, it could rip down walls, it could climb through windows and balance itself through window frames and balconies, it could shimmy down long pillars, it could run 35 miles an hour, all while being 8 feet tall and damn near 1,000 pounds, with 4-inch claws on its hands and legs, with massive teeth filling its entire mouth. Something like this shouldn't exist, and everything that it's capable of doesn't really match its appearance. Like I said, it looked like a naked mole rat with rhino skin that was kinda chubby. So we're all just standing in a circle looking at this obscure ultra predator just laying there lifeless. And then the property manager says, "Oh, poor thing. That's the worst case of mange that I've ever seen." And I'd never heard that word before, mange. So I'm looking at this guy confused. Then he follows up by saying, did it scratch or bite anybody? Did it get a hold of anyone? What's going on around its mouth with all of that foam is telling me that it probably has rabies. So if it touched any of you, you should probably think about getting a shot. I didn't understand why he was talking about what disease it had and not talking about what this thing is. And finally, Adam's dad asked the question that everybody's thinking, what is this thing? And I'm expecting some long-winded answer about what mythical creature this is. And the property manager just looks around the circle, looks us all in the face and says, "That's the 800-pound black bear that I told you guys was aggressive. And that poor bear has no fur because of its mange. And now I see why he was being so aggressive. He probably caught rabies. Poor thing." I couldn't believe what he just said. This was just a bear. It was simply a black bear with no fur. And that day changed my entire perspective on Mother Nature and wildlife. I had no idea that bears were capable of all those things. I had no idea that under all of that fuzzy fur was a horrifying rhino-skinned flubbery killing machine. And to this day, I don't feel like the average person has a healthy fear of bears. I don't think people realize just how dangerous they are. I know that people know they're dangerous, and I know that people would avoid them if they saw them, but there was something about knowing that this thing that we thought was this unbelievable creature was actually a bear, and seeing what it's capable of made me realize that monsters actually do exist, and you don't need to watch scary movies to find them. You could just walk into any national park, and there's 800-pound ultra predators lumbering around, capable of killing anything that walks on land. Monsters do exist. You just think they're teddy bears. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I hope you now have a healthy fear of bears. I encourage you to look up a couple pictures of furless bears. It's absolutely terrifying. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It means more than you think. Thank you guys so much for 400,000 subscribers. It means the world to us. We'll see you next week. We're excited for next week's story, so don't forget to tune in. See you soon. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks that you would also enjoy this one.